In the high-stakes world of finance, fortunes can be made or lost in the blink of an eye. But what happens when the U.S. government accuses you of orchestrating a scheme that sends a pharmaceutical giant's stock into a tailspin? In 2018, the SEC claimed that you, a prominent short seller, spread false and alarming statements about Ligand Pharmaceuticals, allegedly making millions as its stock value spiraled downwards. Was this a calculated act of fraud or a misunderstood crusade for financial truth? Join us as we delve into the gripping tale of an activist priest locked in a courtroom battle against one of the world's most powerful regulatory bodies. In this episode, we will explore the twists, turns, and high-stakes drama of a case that rocked the financial world and tested the very soul of modern finance and the church. Stay tuned. This is a story you won't want to miss.
If you've ever watched this channel and enjoyed the content, or if you're enjoying this episode, could I ask for a small favor? Please hit the subscribe button. Your subscription helps this channel more than I can explain right now, and also makes you an integral part of our success. I promise to return the favor by making the show increasingly better. We're on this journey together, and I'm willing to make that promise to you if you hit the subscribe button.
Wait a second.
Do we have a deal?
Well, you made another big call this week, and it made quite a big splash. We got to talk about it here. Ligand Pharmaceuticals, I mean, you just rocked this stock.
Advancing American freedom, led by the 48th Vice President of the United States, Michael Pence, along with the Southern Policy Law Institute and more than 24 other organizations, joined you and your legal team in fighting to recover attorneys' fees and costs stemming from your 2021 landmark victory over the fraudulent SEC charges. In July 2024, the U.S. District Court affirmed you as a, quote, prevailing party, end quote, in your nearly decade-long fight against the SEC. This followed a November 2021 trial in which a federal jury overwhelmingly rejected the agency's baseless allegations. The action seeks to hold the SEC accountable for the substantial costs incurred during the protracted legal battle. You have described the SEC as a tool of the radical left's policy agenda and as a, quote, corrupt captured regulator, end quote, and pointing out that, quote, sadly, taxpayers won't reclaim the millions squandered on a spiteful case aimed at silencing a whistleblower and shielding fraud at Ligand Pharmaceuticals, which fleeced taxpayers, led to billions in investor losses, and put patients at risk, end quote. How has your decade-long battle with the SEC revealed what you described as a corrupt, politically motivated agenda?
My brother, Brad, a brilliant lawyer.
When Ligand couldn't get this case brought out of the Boston office of the Securities and Exchange Commission, they hired Brad Bondi, the former insider, and he was able to get the case brought right away. In fact, the SEC didn't even check any of the allegations. They simply took all of the completely fraudulent allegations right out of a presentation prepared by Brad Bondi and copy and pasted it into a complaint. In fact, it contained, I think it was 17 demonstrably false allegations, which we told the SEC about. And not only did they not drop the complaint, they refused even to correct the court pleadings, which are a part of the public record. And so they would go on to spend, we estimated, I think, at least $10 million in taxpayer funds through our 2021 trial. It's probably more than that now.
Why did they bring this case?
Why did they bring it? Well, guys like Brad Bondi are sloppy. When we're in San Diego for this deposition, I'll never forget this document shows up. And the title of the document is Project Goldmine. And as we go to that exhibit, Brad Bondi starts to panic. And he suggests that that document should never have been produced, that it was somehow attorney-client privilege, which it wasn't. And tries to claw it back. But I said to my counsel, I said, let's take a restroom break. And we went into another room, and I photographed every page of Project Goldmine before we gave it back. And inside Project Goldmine, which was a meeting between Novartis and Ligand, was the roadmap for preying on people who were sick and dying, and how they could sell them more Promacta by increasing the number of sales representatives and increasing the price. So for them, the sick and the dying were a gold mine. And I took that personally because I go to the hospital often enough to pray for the sick and the dying, to be with them. And all these guys could think about is how to profit off them. See, they knew that these people were a very desperate cohort, that they would do anything to extend life, to grasp at an extra couple weeks, couple months. And so there was this snake oil, Promacta, completely useless. The liver, which is affected by hepatitis C, becomes cirrhotic, is the only organ in the human body which is able to fully regenerate. So you could cut off half a liver, for example, and it'll grow back. It's pretty remarkable. And a cirrhotic liver, a liver damaged by hepatitis C virus or alcohol abuse, it will regenerate. Whatever damage had been done to these people's livers from hepatitis C could be reversed if they had Sovaldi, if they had these new miracle drugs. And Ligand knew that. And Novartis knew that. But notwithstanding that, I mean, hepatitis C, which was killing more people every year, more than any other virus in the world, was set to become like polio, a thing of the past. This new breed of pharmaceutical companies, their boards aren't lined with doctors. They're lined with investment bankers. And their motivation is not to cure disease. It's to maintain symptoms, because for them, that's an annuity. As an investment banker, their sole focus is to increase their share price because they have massive share awards and the insiders sell. And John Higgins from Ligand became very, very wealthy from the fraud he perpetrated, that he plied on Wall Street, and the fraud that they perpetrated, Ligand and Novartis, in the distribution and sale of Promacta. I suppose over 10 years, it must have generated, I don't know, maybe $12, $15 billion, something like that. It's hard to say exactly, but in later years, it was $2 billion a year in sales. And Novartis, being a Swiss company, they would never tip their hand to their involvement. See, companies like Ligand are designed to be intermediaries, like a crumple zone in an automobile that collapses to protect the driver. You see these arrangements in the pharmaceutical industry where there's the companies you see, and then there's ones you don't see. And so while Ligand ultimately would be exposed to the extent that they became the most shorted stock on the entire stock market, nobody ever mentioned Novartis. Well, that's by design. Secrecy is part of the Swiss culture. It's not part of the American culture. So it's easy enough to get a Swiss pharmaceutical giant like Novartis to get someone like John Higgins to take a public role. And what does John Higgins do? Parts with Martin Shkreli.
He's the pharmaceutical company CEO who achieved a lot of notoriety for hiking the price of a life-saving antiviral drug 5,000%.
They're cut from the same cloth. The only difference is that John Higgins, he's the systemic player. He's the one who taught Martin Shkreli the ropes, put him in business. So while the world was obsessed with Martin Shkreli as if he was the big bad wolf, nobody was looking at the real wolf, which was John Higgins at Ligand and his sponsors in Switzerland at Novartis. And the many, I'm sure, millions of people who died with hepatitis C and paid dearly for Promacta during that time.
What was it like being in the government's crosshairs, facing charges designed to destroy your legacy? And how did you maintain your faith while being repeatedly labeled a fraudster by the most powerful financial regulator in the world?
You know, you're never fully alone. We hear in the Holy Scriptures that if God is with us, who can be against us? But people just began to emerge. We had some incredible attorneys, and I had sought out also the advice of people who'd been through it. So when you're targeted by the U.S. government, you become part of a really small club of people, and you enter into a different phase in your life that most people in this world will never be able to relate to. It's one thing to go into litigation in a private civil matter. It's a different thing when the opponent on the other side is the U.S. taxpayer, the U.S. government. But ultimately, every step of the way, I would call my bishop, Bishop Ilia Katri, of blessed memory, who unfortunately is no longer with us. And he was a very, very intelligent man and a godly man. I would call him and just ask for his blessing and say, please, your grace, pray for the sinful and unworthy priest Emmanuel. And one time in particular, I remember walking in this open field in Vermont. And the sun was shining. It must have been maybe May or early June, I'm not sure. And just I could feel this desire inside me to fight this darkness, this evil. And as I called him for his blessing, I just kneeled down. The sun was in my face. I closed my eyes, and I can remember his prayer to this day. He said that these things happen for our perfection, that we suffer so that we might be perfected. And of course, I was building the Chapel of St. Catherine's at the same time. The first Orthodox church to be built in the state of Vermont, the most secular state, according to the Pew Research Center. The state where Russian dissident Alexander Solzhenitsyn had spent 20 years of his life in exile after being persecuted, spending time in gulags for standing up to a corrupt government. And then, of course, St. Catherine of Alexandria herself. She was martyred on a spiked wheel because she stood up to the powers that be. It wouldn't deny Christ. She was eloquent and intelligent woman. And around the time they were getting ready to charge me, or around the time they did charge me, the rather large and polished stainless steel Justinian cross was rising on top of the dome of St. Catherine's. And I remember asking the bishop, I said, do you want to put the cross up there? He said, no, you do it. And that day, I'll never forget being up there, I don't know, 35, 40 feet, at the top of the dome of this beautiful Byzantine chapel, this massive cross on my shoulders. And the SEC is about to charge me publicly, call me a fraud. And I just remember thinking that evil can never overcome God. And so that cross rose on top of that chapel. And then the fight was on. I remember some very wonderful advisors I had, very famous attorneys, the top law firm in America, in D.C., Christian men actually. And I remember them saying to me, one of them was former SEC, he said, they never thought you would fight. They thought you would settle. They always thought this would be over quick and done. They would intimidate you. They never signed up for a 10-year fight. And I think they're probably right. They miscalculated the SEC. That's how you maintain your faith. You fight and you fight and you fight, and you remember that these clowns in the government, they don't know the source of that strength. They don't know that it's a well that never runs out of water, faith in Christ, and that truly if God is with you, nobody can be against you. And that when you view these things as for your own perfection, then you never run out of energy. See, they expect you to run out. The longer the fight went on, the more energy I got. I remember they asked me to settle 7 times. And each time I told them no. But towards the end, our advisors were saying, look, I think they'll settle for nothing. They'll just walk away if you agree not to criticize them publicly. And I told my lawyers to go back and tell them they could kiss my ass. Because what kind of priest would I be if I go to the hospital to pray for the sick and the dying, and I know that these clowns are preying off them, that they've got immunity from our U.S. government, that it's a racket. People probably understand it by this point that the pharmaceutical industry is corrupt. But what they don't understand is that they're enabled by regulators like the SEC. And here I was watching the whole thing unfold. My lead counsel, Doug Brooks, is a Jewish guy. And the guy fought. And I used to call him Simon of Cyrene. He said, who's Simon of Cyrene? I said, look it up. Yeah, that's how you fight. And what you start to realize in time is that these guys who seem to have so much power don't actually have any power at all.
What about your mentor? Did he play a role during that time?
Yeah. Yeah, my old professor from Yale University, Father Robert Spitzer, the genius. And I don't use the word genius lightly. He may be the smartest man on the face of the earth. Yeah, Father Spitzer and Bishop Elia, the spiritual giant and the intellectual giant. That's what they were. But yeah, I would be remiss if I didn't mention Father Robert Spitzer. He encouraged me, like Bishop Elia, to keep going. And when Bishop Elia was gone, he kept encouraging me to keep going to the Supreme Court, even. And he knew and saw things that I couldn't see. And always picked up the phone, was always there. Of course, I'd probably be frowned on by so many of the Orthodox, the turbo-Orthodox. I think that any association with the Catholics is somehow wrong, but it's hard not to overlook that God works through who he wants, and holiness can exist in many different places.
Father Emmanuel, very, very smart, very knowledgeable. I actually personally like him quite a bit.
Anyways, look, we're not called to be nice, Mark. Nice is not a virtue. It doesn't say anywhere in the gospel. It just says we have to be honest, courageous, humble, modest.
He's an interesting guy. Makes the Wolf of Wall Street look like a teddy bear.
Speaking about other projects, what are we going to see something with the priest?
Yeah, we are. We're in development. He is an incredible. The guy is just off the charts at how he's opened my eyes up to a lot of stuff. Financially, first of all, the guy is just brilliant when it comes to analyzing financial statements. The guy's literally, it's like, what is it? A Beautiful Mind, like that sort of thing, you know. He just is incredible with that, dissecting it and really being able to analyze companies and stocks.
No, he's an interesting character. One of my favorite parts, actually, of the series was when he breaks down the zebra business, man, and just totally just rips it apart, and you just don't see that coming from a father like that. I thought that was so good.
Oh, and that was edited down because he is... You know, when Mark goes, you don't need to be Machine Gun Kelly, right. Like he's like, and he says, like, it doesn't say anywhere in the Bible you have to be nice.
We later discovered the chancellor, this guy, Theodora Barbas, who I had previously called for his removal when he put a pedophile priest in a church in Maine, who ended up horrifically raping an altar boy. And we learned later on that he was working with the SEC, that he'd been lying to federal investigators, which is a federal process crime. Had we reported him to the prosecutor's office, he probably would have been charged with criminal charges. And we learned that George Sougarakis, the corporate counsel, had felt compelled to team up with the SEC. For Sougarakis, it's reasons best known to himself. I'll never forget when I started working on security analysis, publishing articles and so forth, very academic, my interest in Wall Street. And having someone very close to me walk away with millions of dollars and to steal from me and to steal my track record. That was the first wake-up call to the darkness of Wall Street. You know, it's been said in the gospel that the roots of all kinds of evil is the love of money. And I think the second big blow was seeing the lies and the evil of the pharmaceutical industry working together with the U.S. government, the SEC, the collusion, their greedy pursuit of billions of dollars in indecent profits. And I think the third blow was losing Doug McLean when he took his own life. And then I think after that I must have changed. And I stopped feeling things. And I don't think I ever fully recovered from that. And I remember one day my lawyer, Doug Brooks, was reading a letter I had written earlier in my priestly ministry. And he just looked at me and he said, "You've changed." And I think it occurred to me at that moment he was right. And it's a blessing to not feel things. And also, you pay a high price for it. When you go through a fight like that for so long, when every major financial media outlet in the world, from Japan to France to Russia, write some form of a lie about you, you stop caring about your reputation, actually. And that's also very freeing. And you realize that most people in the world spend all this time and mental energy curating and cultivating a reputation, which God could care less about, because he knows your heart and he knows your character. So when that's shattered, you're strangely free.
Who is Father Emmanuel now?
Who am I? I'm the priest who took on the U.S. government that was colluding with the pharmaceutical industry and won. They're an embarrassment to American ideals and to what American capital markets could be. Most Americans probably think regulators like the SEC are policing the markets. They don't police the markets. They don't work for you and I. They don't work for the investing public. They're there for selfish ends. They're corrupt through and through, and they lie. And the father of all lies is the devil. In fact, the word in Greek for devil, diabolos, it means the slanderer, the one who tells lies. So when you see the lies that they hurl, the lies that they live, you know where it comes from. It comes from a certain spirit, not the Holy Spirit. And I'm sure many people will say, "But Father, what are you doing working on Wall Street? You're a priest, for crying out loud. Christians shouldn't even be in the business of collecting interest in any way, shape, form, or fashion." And I think that's right. I think the prohibition on usury, which we've long since done away with in the church, in practical terms at least, is correct. But I have yet to find a single Orthodox clergyman at any level, a deacon, a priest, a bishop, a synod, church, a diocese, an archdiocese, a patriarchate, that isn't directly or indirectly involved in capital markets. Pretty sure of the 500 plus Greek Orthodox clergymen in America, for example, that they all have some form of a 401k or an IRA or some sort of investment account managed through the archdiocese or independently. Now, whether or not they're actively involved in that is another story, but they are passively or indirectly involved. All I've ever tried to say is that if we're going to be involved in capital markets, we might as well be intelligent about it. Because being unintelligent about it, sticking our head in the sand, doesn't make us better Christians. It doesn't make us better stewards. But I think I can one-up that even so. And by the way, if you need any evidence, bear that out, that being financially unintelligent doesn't make us better Christians or better stewards. Look at the Vatican Bank, which is on the verge of bankruptcy. That's not a badge of honor. But certainly we're all aware that one of the few times that Christ showed a righteous anger was when he overturned the tables of the money changers. And the money changers at that time were essentially the liquidity providers to the market, and not unlike today's investment banks and stockbrokers, and we could say hedge fund managers. But riddle me this. If a priest shouldn't be involved in the collection of interest, can he be involved in selling fraud short? I mean, really. Because the Holy Scriptures tell us that have nothing to do with the fruitless acts of darkness, but rather reveal them. So if you've got the ability to analyze financial statements and you uncover fraud, you've got a moral, ethical, and civic responsibility to reveal it. Then if you're running a fund, you've got a fiduciary responsibility to your investors to profit from it. But if you reveal a fraud and you bring down a $6 billion pharmaceutical company like Ligand Pharmaceuticals, as I did, and you expose those son of a for preying on the sick and the dying, the same people you go and you minister to in the hospital, and your investors get paid while you do it, is it the same thing as the prohibition on usury?
has a poor track record on fasting. He was once accused of using vulgar language, but he said the accusation was bullshit. He loves the smell of gasoline and burning oil around his motorcycles and never stops drinking Coke Zero. He hasn't learned how to walk away from a fight. He's been to hell and back more than once, bringing a few public companies along for the ride. Other clergy scoff at him. The SEC and Big Pharma try to, quote, silence him for good. But their efforts haven't had the intended effect. That's Father Emmanuel.
Growing up in Tirana, where the call to a dawn echoed from the spiraling minarets, was a powerful experience for her. Albanians were forced to convert to Islam under Ottoman rule. In 1967, under the Marxist-Leninist regime, Albania became the world's first atheist state and destroyed churches to eradicate Christianity, in a land where St. Paul once preached the gospel. Her grandfather fought as a guerrilla fighter, and her father commanded a tank brigade. When communism collapsed, there was an insurrection against the state, leading to anarchy. Albanian women are known for their resilience. It is said they are born from the barrel of a gun. As a teenager, her father was flown out of the country without notice on a military helicopter to save his life. From then on, she started sleeping with an AK-47 next to her bed.